terrible knocking things over on stage is one of my habits. So I wrote this book. So I'm going to read a few bits and pieces from it. Okay. What's your name? This is kind of very early. I was born in 1947. We still had ration books until 1954. My parents lost a week's worth in dithering before registering me as Christopher, which turned out to be among the nation's favourite names, alongside Michael. My brother was always called Michael or Mike, and never Mick, which was chosen later at school by his mates, no doubt. At that time, Mick was also slang for any Irishman. My father shouldn't have had any grounds for complaint. His mother had christened him Basil, rather posh. But playing football as a lad, his teammates rejected it and reverted to the simple and affectionate Joe, which alliterated to his surname, and it stuck for the rest of his life. My first year also saw the birth of the National Health Service, so I've been lucky enough to know it all my life. Exotic fruit was appearing on the horizon, and once, when I was given a banana, Mick quipped, "I never knew what that was when I was young." Just shows he's been jealous of me. Conditions were getting better after the war compared to Mick's early days, when a major concern was where the next bombs might drop. My mother had briefly taken my mother to the north for safety to Greenfield in Yorkshire, where our paternal grandparents lived, but it was so quiet that she soon returned saying they didn't even know there was a war going on up there. Like many others, she disliked the damp and smelly air raid shelter at the bottom of the garden, retreating instead with my brother under the stairs or, in an emergency, under the kitchen table, hoping for the best. His earliest recollections are thus of bombs dropping and flashes in the sky, which must have given him good ideas for songs. During the Blitz, Dartford, which is where we lived, was in the firing line, as in Kent, because German bombers would fly up the blackened outline of the Thames estuary and drop their loads on numerous engineering works in the area. J&E Hall, who made refrigeration equipment, Vickers, who made the casing for Barnes-Wallis dam-busting, bouncing bombs, and nearby Woolwich Arsenal, where my Uncle Horace worked during the war, sometimes on one-off prototype torpedoes or other warheads. Street life. The coalmen and rag and bone men made their rounds on horse-drawn carts, the only pollution being the occasional droppings that people scooped up to spread on their roses. Curtains might twitch open if the horse deposited outside, so you had to retrieve it before your neighbours did. There were few cars in the street, so we played a lot of games there, footer and cycling, while the girls skipped and chalked out hopscotch. Once some tough lads slashed the tyres of my tricycle, but overall Dartford was a safe place to grow up. Nearby lay the sand pit, a massive crater where V1 flying bomb had fallen at the end of the war, shaking foundations and shattering windows, but causing little other damage. My brother Mick once climbed the sandpit railings, we used to go there to play, with his friend Michael Spinks, and slit his hand open, requiring a number of stitches, proudly displaying the wound. More sinister for me, when I was aged around 7, my best friend Jimmy Sinclair was killed there, drowned in quicksand, an event that gave me nightmares. We still went there, of course. Danger was always an essential element of kids' play. And what better friend and protector can a boy have when growing up than a big brother? At the time, of course, I was unaware of his kindness when he picked me up or held my hand to keep me safely by his side. I felt only the simple bond that connects two children and took it for granted. When I became more independent, I would pull away from that control, and no doubt he was only too glad to be rid of the responsibility. But when I look at two of my youngest grandchildren, separated by fewer years, the care and attention shown by the 3-year-old to his small brother is wonderful to behold, although of course they might have a vicious fight the next instant. The eldest son has often the higher status than his siblings. The eldest is special, and my father likely wanted him to follow a profession, even teaching, which is what he was. Mother had wished with all her heart for a girl, and all she got was me. So my mother and I doted on each other and always showed our affection openly. Not once did my father display any preferences between his sons, treating us as equally special. Many years later, I stood next to him at a social gathering, and an old colleague of his approached him. "How's your son?" he asked, to which Dad smiled and said, "Which one? I have two." I cannot imagine the trouble I must have given my parents and my brother over the years. But in 2006, as my father lay in hospital at the end of his life, I softly sang his favourite song, lyric of mine, "Whispering wind, follow me to arms that are loving, a heart that is true." And he gave me the most beautiful smile in the world.
Wow.